Previously, I told you how they shut me out, how the neighbors whispered, how the woman I had once called a friend twisted my kindness into suspicion. I told you how her own relatives laughed at me, accused me of waiting for something in return, when all I ever wanted was to help. But what I haven't told you yet is this: betrayal doesn't end when a door slams. Sometimes, betrayal continues to echo through your life, poisoning everything it touches, and the deepest cut was still to come. The nights grew longer, colder. Autumn leaves scattered across my yard, but I no longer had the will to sweep them. My days blurred together, waking, eating a little bread, sitting by the window, sleeping again. I moved through life like a shadow, half alive, half lost in memories I couldn't escape. I thought constantly of the sound of that door slamming, of her voice telling me not to return. The words repeated endlessly in my mind, louder than church bells, louder than storms. I had given them months of my life, my strength, my very heart, and yet I was nothing more than a nuisance in their story. What made it worse was the silence. She never once came to my door, not to apologize, not to thank me, not even to explain. I was erased from her life as if I had never existed. One afternoon, I forced myself to the market. I hoped that being among people might ease the loneliness. But as I entered, conversations hushed, eyes shifted away. I felt their stares prick my skin, sharp as needles. An old acquaintance approached me, her expression polite but distant. She leaned close and whispered, "It's better if you stay quiet about everything. The more you talk, the more foolish you'll look." Her words burned. Stay quiet, as if silence were the answer, as if my story didn't matter. I walked home slowly, my basket light, my steps heavy. Inside my house, I placed the bread on the table, sat down, and wept. Not loud sobs, but quiet tears that seemed to drain the last of my strength. That evening, as the sun set, I lit a small lamp and opened my Bible. The words swam before my eyes. I wanted to believe in forgiveness, in love, in faith, but all I could feel was emptiness. I whispered aloud, "Lord, why did you let me be cast aside like this? Why does kindness end in humiliation?" No answer came, only the flickering flame of the lamp. Days passed in this silence. I stopped tending the garden. Weeds grew tall, leaves rotted on the ground. I stopped sewing, my hands too heavy to lift the needle. I simply sat by the window, watching the world move on without me. Sometimes I caught glimpses of her across the street. She laughed with relatives, greeted neighbors warmly, carried on as if I had never been a part of her life. Each time, my heart ached. Each time, I whispered to myself, how can she forget so quickly? The pain was not just in what she had done, but in what she had taken. She had stolen not only my strength and my time, but also my dignity, my place in the eyes of others. I was no longer seen as a woman who had given. I was seen as a woman who had overstepped, who had wanted too much. And that, dear listener, is the kind of wound that does not heal easily. Because it's one thing to lose a friend. It's another to lose your good name. And soon, I would learn that even that was not the end. because the cruelest revelation was waiting just ahead, something that would shake me so deeply I would never look at kindness, trust, or friendship the same way again. The first frost came early that year. I remember watching the white crystals spread across the grass outside my window, each one beautiful, fragile, and fleeting. Just like trust, I thought, just like everything I had given. I rarely left the house by then. Every time I stepped outside, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Whispers followed, not always loud enough to catch the words, but clear enough to know their meaning. One Sunday, I forced myself to go to church. I had always found comfort there, always believed that faith could lift the heaviest burdens. I sat quietly in the pew, folding my hands in prayer. But the silence around me was different that morning. Cold, empty. People shifted away, leaving a space on either side of me. The hymns were sung, but I felt no warmth in them. After the service, I lingered, hoping someone, anyone, would speak to me. Finally, an old friend approached. For a moment, I thought she might offer comfort. Instead, she sighed and said softly, "You should try to move on. People talk, and it's best if you don't make it worse by being seen too much." Her words pierced me. Move on? As if kindness, betrayal, and heartbreak were nothing more than gossip to be brushed aside. I walked home slowly, my knees aching, my chest heavy with a weight no prayer seemed to lift. That week, I overheard more. At the market, a group of women spoke openly, not caring that I was near. She was obsessed, one said. Always hanging around, as if she owned them, another replied. And now she plays the victim, a third added. They laughed, as though my pain were nothing more than a tale to amuse them. I wanted to shout, to remind them of the nights I stayed awake, the meals I cooked, the hours I spent at a bedside when no one else dared to. But the words never left my mouth. I stood there frozen, my hands gripping the edge of my basket until my knuckles turned white. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my chair by the window, staring at her house across the street. Lights flickered inside, voices rose in laughter. She'd moved on, surrounded by people, supported, accepted. And me? I was alone in the shadows, my name turned into poison, my story rewritten by others. It was then I realized something painful. Betrayal doesn't just take away what you gave, it steals how others see you. And once your name is tainted, it's as if the world prefers to believe the lie, because the truth is too inconvenient. One evening, as I went to fetch water, 2 children passed by. They looked at me, whispered, and burst into giggles. "She's the crazy one," I heard one of them say. The words stabbed deeper than I expected. To children, I was already nothing but a story, a cautionary tale their parents had twisted and passed down. I stood there, the bucket heavy in my hands, my heart sinking lower than ever before. I wanted to scream at the sky, to ask why kindness had turned into such cruelty. But no answer came, only silence, only the mocking echo of laughter behind closed doors. And here, dear listener, I must ask you, have you ever been painted as something you're not? Have you ever given all of yourself, only for others to twist your story into something unrecognizable? If you have, please tell me in the comments. Tell me from where in the world you are listening. Let your words stand where mine were silenced. Because the truth is, loneliness grows heavier when no one believes you. And by then, I was carrying the heaviest loneliness of my life. But as much as it hurt, the cruelest revelation was still waiting for me. One final blow that would prove that betrayal does not always end with lies. Sometimes it goes further. Sometimes it takes from you even the little dignity you thought you had left. And that moment was closer than I ever imagined. Winter crept in quietly, but inside me the cold had been there for months. My firewood burned quickly, yet no warmth reached my heart. Each day felt like a slow march through shadows, and though I tried to keep to myself, the world outside refused to leave me in peace. One morning, as I returned from the well, I met an old neighbor on the path. We had once shared laughter, exchanged recipes, helped each other through lean seasons. But that day, her eyes avoided mine. She hesitated, then said in a voice low but sharp, "You should be ashamed. After all they did for you, after how much they trusted you, and you tried to take advantage." The bucket slipped from my hands, water spilling into the snow. My lips trembled. "That's not true," I whispered. "I never wanted anything from them. I only helped." She shook her head, her face hard. "That's not what she said. She told everyone you hovered around them because you expected money. Or more. She said you made her life harder when she needed peace." Her words felt like a blade twisting inside me. I wanted to cry out, to defend myself, but she turned and walked away, leaving me in the cold, the spilled water seeping into my shoes. That evening, I sat by the fire, clutching my shawl tight around me. My mind replayed her accusation over and over. Money, expectation, hardship. How had my sleepless nights, my aching bones, my endless hours of care turned into this? And then I realized it wasn't just whispers anymore. It was her story against mine. And in the eyes of others, her grief made her believable. My silence made me guilty. A few days later, I heard it again, this time from the lips of a man at the market. He smirked as I passed, muttering to another, "Imagine pretending to be kind just to get written into a will. Some people are shameless." I stopped, my heart racing. I turned to face him, my voice shaking. "That's a lie. I never asked for anything." He only shrugged, unconvinced. "That's not what she said." And there it was, the confirmation of my worst fear. She had not only turned her back on me, she had painted me as a parasite, a woman who preyed on the dying. The humiliation was unbearable. I returned home, shut the door, and collapsed into a chair. Tears poured down my face, but even in my grief, I felt anger simmering beneath. Anger at her lies, anger at their laughter, anger at myself for ever believing that kindness would be remembered. I thought of all the nights I held his hand as he struggled to breathe. I thought of the meals I cooked when she was too tired to stand. I thought of the hours I spent in silence, praying for him to see another sunrise. And yet, none of it mattered now. In the story she told, I was nothing but a shadow, greedy, intrusive, unwanted. The truth had been buried beneath her words, and I had no voice strong enough to dig it out. That night, I didn't light the fire. I sat in the dark, the cold seeping into my bones, and whispered to myself, kindness was never my mistake. My mistake was believing it would be remembered. But even then, I didn't yet know the cruelest part, because soon I would learn that her betrayal didn't end with lies. It reached further, into the very heart of who I was, into the last shred of dignity I had left. And when I discovered it, I realized the final wound was one I might never recover from. The first snow covered the ground in silence, hiding the dirt, the footprints, the broken things. It looked beautiful from my window, pure, untouched. And for a moment, I wished life could be the same. That all the scars, all the whispers, all the pain could be buried under a blanket of white. But life is not like snow. Wounds stay. One morning, a knock came at my door. My heart leapt. I hadn't heard that sound in months. For a moment, I foolishly hoped it was her, that she had finally come to make peace. But when I opened the door, it was not her. It was a man I didn't know well, one of her relatives. He stood tall, his expression sharp. I came to tell you something, he said coldly. You should stop telling people you helped them. You are a burden, not a blessing. She doesn't want your name tied to theirs anymore. Do you understand? I stared at him, my hands trembling. But it's the truth. I was there every day. I cooked, I cleaned, He cut me off with a sneer. Enough. If you don't keep quiet, we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are. And then he left, leaving me standing in the cold doorway, the words echoing in my ears. What kind of woman you really are. That was the final blow. Not only had they erased my kindness, they wanted to erase me, my story, my truth, everything I had lived through. In that moment, I felt something inside me break. I sank into my chair and stared at the walls of my empty house. The silence was unbearable. For the first time in my life, I wished I could disappear, wished I had never stepped across that street, wished I had never offered my help. But then, as the hours passed, I realized something. They could twist my story. They could spread their lies. They could take my dignity, my reputation, even my place among my neighbors. But they could never take the truth of what I had done. I know what I gave. I know the nights I stayed awake, the prayers I whispered, the food I cooked with tired hands. I know the weight I carried when no one else would. And maybe the world will never believe me. Maybe my name will always be stained in their eyes. But I carry the truth inside me, and that is something no one can erase. So here I am, telling you my story, not to ask for pity, not to beg for sympathy, but because silence is the weapon they wanted to use against me, and I refuse to give it to them. And now, dear listener, I turn to you. If you have ever been betrayed after giving your all, if you have ever been silenced, erased, or painted as something you are not, I want you to write it in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me if you felt this kind of pain. Because when our stories are spoken, they live. And when they live, no one can take them away. I helped them until the end. I gave them everything I had. And in return, they slammed the door in my face. But my voice, my truth, remains. And tonight, you've heard it.